which is very exciting that she took the time to do that. And in the meanwhile, I will drop the link to our program if you don't have it already for the corporate chat. And it will be really helpful for you all if you want to access it to follow along. You can see each other's responses. And this is the same thing that we all will be looking at once. Hi, Ilonka.
Yeah, so we're both newbies in Gnowbe, right? So I think we're ready to go, Ilonka. Will you show Gnowbe? You'll present Gnowbe?
Absolutely, yeah. And we're ready to go. So Anouk, I think you've explained to the audience today that I will drive Gnowbe for you, and you will just continue.
Yes. So first of all, thanks everyone for joining, and we appreciate your patience as we go through this journey in the next 45 minutes. I have the pleasure to be here with Ilonka as my partner in crime. We're relatively new to Gnowbe in that regard, but we've been using it now for the last 6 to 9 months as we've been rethinking and reimagining training and learning as part of our whitewater transformation kind of community, where we help and coach and mentor organizations to navigate through change. And one of the things we've learned is that in order to do this in an effective way, so Young was talking about as well, that's why we talk quite a bit around how do we take use of transformational learning in that particular part. And I think people can follow along, right, which I think is a great one to do. And I think when we were talking about the journey, and our title is all about designing for the learner growth in an ever-changing world, we thought, to use the analogy of a tree, and a tree, of course, is a metaphor for growth. And I think you're seeing a magnificent tree. I think you see a healthy tree. You see a powerful tree. And we all know that, if we want to have a happy, strong, healthy tree, it is very much also representative around how organizations and people, right, grow as a result of that. I think the roots are the foundation, of course, for all that growth, but we also know that roots you can't have, right, if you don't have the soil that is fertile underneath it, right, when you don't create the right conditions for growth as a result of that. And I think that if you look at a healthy tree, it's also about the care they get. If it's sun, water, is it the right conditions? So the tree is very much a metaphor for growth, but it's also a metaphor around how organizations and people learn, right, in today's environment. And we also know that when the tree is very strong, the trunk is strong, the roots are strong, it is a foundation to also weather, different times and different storms, because we are living in an ever-changing world. And there's no doubt that all of these aspects kind of are key in order to do that. The last thing I want to add is that normally when you see healthy trees, you see healthy trees around them as well. And I think that, we learn better and we grow better if we grow together. And I think that's some of the things we want to talk to you about in our session today. So Ilonka, if we go to the next part, and I think it would be good to start with, a bit of, a quick poll, right? Because I think if we think about that change, how does that go? And I think if we look at how does a strong tree, right, and how does a strong, I would say, how does a strong organization as such kind of survive in an ever-changing world? What are some of the things that are important, right, for individuals to survive, to be the best version they can be, whatever their environment is? So if you can just kind of click a bit on some of the responses that make sense for you, right, of what is important for you to kind of, I would say, learn and be the best version you be in an environment of change. So I think you can participate accordingly as well. So I think it's a question, right? I think it's all of us kind of understand the need to adapt, the need to understand the knowledge, critical thinking. So these are all kind of ways for people to help. And I think that if you have a strong tree, it also shows that all of these skills, right, are very much aligned. And I think this shows it's about not just working on the person as such, but it's working on the organization and working together as a whole. So when you think about and yeah, we see a bit of the votes here. I was probably too quick, right, in order to look at that. Yeah, resilience and growth mindset, absolutely. So let's kind of continue, because I think if you look at you know, the fact that all of us react in a different way, and it's normal, right? Because I think we all know that we live in this VUCA world, and I think today people talk about VUCA, they talk about Bani, they talk about tuna. I've heard about RUPT, and I also heard about VUCA DD, right? So it's amazing how in today's environment, you know, there's various acronyms to describe what we are, but I think we all know that in fact organizations and people are going through a lot of change. I think the future of work is one of the areas that a lot of people are concerned about. I think if you think about, you know, the needs and wants of people have changed right after COVID. There's this push for sustainability and climate and equality in that regard. I think you have the war in Ukraine, what happened there. I think no one would have foreseen that. But moreover, right, I think if you think about today's environment, do we have the skills, right, to win in tomorrow's environment? And I think what is clear that organizations have a choice in today's environment. Do they want to lean in and kind of thrive and be a leader in all of that? Or are they going to be a follower and just go with the flow and see what happens, right? So I think in today's environment, there's no doubt that there's an opportunity for each of us to kind of, you know, lean in and navigate this. But it's about mindset and making most out of it. And adaptability will be crucial, right, if you want to navigate this environment. So let's keep going. Ilonka, perhaps to the next one. I think this next kind of Paul is a bit asking you, right? If you think about VUCA, Bani, tuna, whatever it is, what are some of the challenges you're facing in your world today that are the most obvious? You know, in my particular case, it might be around how do we embrace technology, right? That's part of learning, as we're doing today. But what could it be for yourself, right? What are some of the things that are on your mind as you navigate through this change? So perhaps a few seconds to get people's input on that. Yeah. So I think we're all probably living, you know, this change in different ways, and I'm also mindful that, you know, we're doing this session, and I think lots of people will follow the session later on. So I think it just is a question about what makes sense for you, right? But it's clear that we are all kind of experiencing this in one way and the other, and it makes sense, right? Because if you think about, if we go to the next part. It is clear that over the years in the environment that we have, that the ways of working has changed, the way of learning has changed. We've kind of just talked about it earlier on. And if you think about in the past, people were seen as human resources, right? It was assets. It's about, you know, it's about resources that one uses as such. But in today's environment, just resources and assets are not, you know, the same anymore. It's not just a question of labor that we're looking at. It's about skills. It's a capability. It's about what are the things that people need, right, in order to thrive in an environment. And what we're noticing as well is that the expectations that people have are different. If an organization wants to stay relevant and they want to win, and they want to be innovative, they can't look at people and the way you work in the old ways, right? They need to look at it in a different perspective. And one of the things which is clear is that the economy will grow, but labor will be constrained. And it is one of the key issues CEOs have on their mind is, how do I keep my people fit for purpose? Moreover, how can I just not have them fit for purpose, but how can I keep them engaged, motivated, and feel empowered to be the best version that they can be. So it requires a different mindset. It requires a different approach. And that also means it needs a different approach of learning as well, because the old way obviously doesn't work anymore. So let's go to the next thing, the next section, Ilonka, because when you think about the fact of creating or being energized and feeling innovative and feeling wanted and empowered, what does that mean, right? If you think as a solution, or you think about a workplace that you are, or an environment that you are, what gets the best out of you? What motivation do you have as a result of that? And we're testing out also a bit, the different ways of engaging with the audience. So instead of using words, we thought, why don't you use your creative skills and try to kind of upload a bit of a picture or draw something, right? We're not going to go as far as a video because it would be a bit too much. But what does for you describe happiness, engagement, can do, excitement? So perhaps let's try that out if that is something you want to get some input on.
We're going to give a few seconds if you want to share your photo, or if you feel you want to do it later, it's also fine. No pressure. But just think of a photo or an image or a happiness.
Because eventually I think it is a nice way to kind of think about yourself in a different way, and perhaps people might still load it up later on, right, Ilonka? I think just in the interest of time,
I think, Anouk, we're going to move on, but try and share a photo. I think if we are at the moment going out on different continents, and there will be a lot of people that shares their input. So I would invite you to come back later and share again.
Let's try to
all
see.
You need to do is to say you'll do it within 12 hours, or you will do it in 9 hours. And for sure, you will receive a notification from Gnowbe that will remind you that we are awaiting your picture.
But one of the things that I think I've learned throughout my career is that if you do something that is very much aligned to your motivation, and that's part of how you're emotionally connected as well. That is often, in fact, that gets you going. That is also, a bit your happy place. So how do you keep that happy place, right, in an environment that changes, constantly? And how do you make sure that you are always that best version in everything you do, and you can stay relevant, right, despite the environment that you have around you? And I came across over the last couple of years of a gentleman called Bob Keegan. He's a Harvard professor. He works together with a number of folks, including Andy Fleming. He works quite a lot together with Carol Dweck as well from the Growth Mindset. And he's the guru a bit that kind of talked about how do you create a deliberate developmental organization. And it's about how do you create organization where you learn constantly in everything you do. I think So Young spoke a bit about the 70-20-10 rule, right? That we all know is around that blended learning. But in fact, what Bob Keegan kind of says is that in the past, training and development was all about filling the bucket, right? And giving people more access to different types of learning and insights and information and all of that. But in fact, he also noticed that a lot of that learning was wasted, right? Because in fact, what you were just doing, you were filling the bucket to a point where it explodes, right? And now we're in an environment that is of constant change, where we see people are often overwhelmed. They kind of are not sure what's happening. And so, how do you create effective learning? It's not about doing more, it's about doing it differently. And so he talks about how do you grow the bucket? How do you go from within and making sure that you link it to the person about what the person needs, but also how do they work within the ecosystem, how do they work across different areas, and making sure that in fact you grow them from within, using the 70-20-10 rule, having multiple experiences, but making sure that it becomes part of what they do. So you learn by doing through what you do throughout your life, right? So you bring learning part of the fuel that fuels you in your life, rather than something additional that you just add. And so I think this whole notion about growing the bucket is something very important, right? That I think you can do with a Gnowbe, but that you can do in general when you think about transformation learning, because you make it stick, you make it part of what they do. And so I think it's in fact, according to him, that is the way how adults learn, that how learning should go. And that is also something you can adopt across whatever environment that you have, right? So let's keep going, because I'd love to get your thoughts about how do you kind of grow your bucket? How do you develop yourself? Yes, you do lots of training and you have the 70-20-10 rule in mind, but if you think about your daily routines, if you think about, you know, you're interacting with others, you know, what are some of the things you do in order to grow that bucket? So just take a couple of seconds to think about. And if you feel comfortable, it would be great to also share it with the group board. And so don't think about the traditional things. Yes, I read every day, Ilonka, that's true. But what else do you do, right? Outside the reading every day, there might be other things that you do that are ways for you to learn in a constant way, even if it's not considered as learning per se in the past, right? But it's part of what we do. So I would encourage everyone just to think about, what do you do to grow your bucket, right? Or you're just filling it with information and all of that. We want to share that with the group, Ilonka, as well.
Yep. And I encourage everybody, please share, because we learn from each other. And
yeah. But people might say, right, that they don't have any time to learn. And to be honest, you know, that's an interesting question, right? Do you need time to learn, and how much time do you have to learn? So let's have another poll, right? Because we were keen to kind of see how much time do you spend, right? Learning at this particular point. According to yourself, right? Are you learning more than 15%? Are you learning between 1% and 5%? And this is regarding your work week, right? So do you learn less than 1%, 6 to 10%? I'm keen to kind of get some answers on this, just to get a sense what people are thinking, right? Ah, okay. There's still, well, there's some people learning more than 15%, 6 to 10%. I think that's great, and I would say that's amazing, because I think you think about learning in a broad way, and that's very encouraging. Because when I was kind of doing some research, and I love George Berson, and I'm not sure if you follow him, he's definitely a thought leader in the HR space, does a lot on learning, culture, and creating, I would say, a resistible organization. So he's someone who does a lot of work in that regard. And he kind of noticed that, in fact, a typical work week of a person and people learn is overall around 1%. Which in fact, some of you are far above the average, right? And why are they 1%? Is because they're overwhelmed, they're distracted, they're impatient, they don't have time, right? And we've seen the environment everyone is, right? They're constantly under pressure in many aspects. And when you think about the learning, then often the learning is remote, because of course people are in various locations. They're looking of what is relevant for them at that time, right? So they're very picky in that regard. You see more and more people like to learn together, which was also Ilonka's point earlier on, and also feel empowered. But it is very low, right? The 1%. So that also means that every moment matters, right? In that regard. And that's why I think we as HR professionals and our learning professionals need to put our best foot forward, right? Of making that 1% count. And how can we do that? Well, we'll talk to that a bit in the next sections, because if you think about, let's continue to the next part, just as a tree's roots nourishes growth, the right learning format anchors our knowledge and allows us to flourish and reach new heights. And I think that's a responsibility we all carry, right? Is making those moments that matter count, right? In that regard. So let's continue in the conversation. You know, this is an interesting one, right? If you think about on demand, what works for you, what does work for you, right? Of the type of learning that it makes sense for you or for your organization. There's a couple of examples here, like online university, there's learning paths, there's digital learning, there's learning in the flow of work. That means learning that is part of what you do and the type of work you do and make it available. And there's also focus on building capabilities, right? So any specific thoughts from your side that might be interesting? That would be a preference for you. Yeah, and again, it's quite you know, it's quite varied, right? Where certain people appreciate more this type of learning versus the other, and I see learning in the flow of work as being a key one, and I think it's important, right, to be able to do that, because when again we come back to Josh Burstyn, and let's talk to him, you know, about him a bit earlier. He talked about corporate learning over the years, and the interesting thing was, you know, so Young talk about PowerPoint. Since when was PowerPoint developed, right? And it's amazing how since then not much has changed in that regard. But if you think about learning, there's been a lot of learning, and digital learning has been, I would say, the key trend, right, in all of that. But I think more and more what you see is that the digital learning and all the platforms and the tools and the mindset that changed, I think it's been around how do you integrate it, right, in the type of work you do. And we know that work has changed. We talked about that earlier. So how do you integrate it as part of the ecosystem? But again, what he's seeing as a trend is that it's not going to be enough, right? In addition to the flow of work, it's also about, you know, creating that additional focus on capabilities, because the future of work will look very different, and it will be technology driving a lot of the change. So how do you do how do you become digital with a human touch, and the human touch will be different capability that needs to be built. I think it's about talent marketplace. It's about how do you move and how do you create mobility. But the most important thing as well is about how do you learn to grow, and how do you make sure that you keep it relevant with all the things that we've talked to do, and make it stick in an environment that is changed, that allows you to be fit for purpose, not just for now, but also for later, right? And so I think I would really encourage you to read some of the Josh Burstyn material, because it's really great. I think with lots of interesting talks, but I think it also shows that we're not stopping evolving, right? And we need to go, you know, with where the flow is, right, in that regard. And so I'm going to kind of now hand it over a bit to Ilonka to talk a bit about the transformational learning piece and how we are using that, right, in our world. So Ilonka, can I kind of hand it back to you then? Well, I've been handing it to you, but can I have you
yes.
talk to the rest? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Anouk. And I just want to once again say thank you for everybody's patience. They say learning is messy. So it was a bit messy in the beginning, but I think we all get to know Gnowbe, and we learn how to work the new technology. And if you think about the earlier poll that we had to do, it was evident that technology is our challenge in the future. And how do we work with it? And what is it that we need to do in order to grow our skills? So I want you to reflect for a moment on your own personal learning before I proceed. How do you actively identify your critical skills and knowledge that will contribute to your own growth and success? So just for a minute, think about it. And remember, as we said earlier, you don't have to type it in right now. I just love Gnowbe's platform at this point in time, where if I don't have time to think about it right now, I can always set the clock for in an hour's time, because maybe then the answer would come to mind. And then share that with the group, because what is important for us today, and especially on Gnowbe, is remember tomorrow you're going to go back to the group again, and you're going to see what has everybody shared, and maybe I can learn something from somebody else. So I am going to proceed. And I think that's very important for me. Just when we started the session, Anouk showed the tree with those wonderful roots. And those roots are the foundation for that beautiful tree. But we, as learning designers, learning experience designers, people within the field of learning, need to give these seeds water every day. And when we develop learning, we need to make sure that we create learning in the right way. But we also need to change the way we do learning, the way we design learning. So again, I want you to think about transformational learning for a minute. And what does that mean for you? What do you currently know or believe about the concept of transformational learning? And it would be great if you can share that with us. And again, a reminder, you can set the clock if you want to, but it would be great if you can share. Okay, so I need to apologize. I'm not going to go to the group right now because I think we might have limited time. Anouk might pick up for us on the group and see if somebody has given us feedback so far. But what I want to do for now is to focus on transformational learning and knowing, but what is transformational learning? And I know the word transformation is all over. Everybody talks about transformation. Transformation in the digital world, transformational learning, transformation in human resources. So what is it? For me, transformational learning is about a process where the individual needs to change his beliefs, his attitudes, and his values. What do you believe about your own skill or your own behavior? And that's where Anouk and I have created for the organization that we work with a process in saying, but how are we going to help our people to grow, our international experts, how will they grow in the organization? So we say that transformational learning is about a shift, a mind shift, your worldview, and it goes beyond just sharing knowledge and skill. So often we just go to courses and we learn something, but we forget about it. We never have time to sit and reflect and say, but what does that mean in my world? What does it mean to my beliefs? I always use the example of a person that believes that he can't be a public speaker. He believes he can't be a public speaker. So what does he do? He goes on training and he goes and learn about the knowledge and the skill, but that's where it ends. Where transformational learning kicks in is we say, we give that person time to reflect on that knowledge and that skill. And how does that affect his world or his beliefs? So when he goes into that reflection mode, he might find out that the beliefs that he had was false, because it's not about his beliefs. It may be something else that he was believing, and he learned a new skill, which made it so much easier for him. So that is our learning journey. We go through a learn, think, apply, share learning process where we involve snippets of learning. Sometimes we develop micro-learning, we make use of cohorts, and we make use of mentors in the workspace. So I'm just going to go to the next slide, where I will share with you our design that we apply. Earlier on in the conference, you heard about learn, reflect, think, apply, share. So obviously that cannot happen in one session. It happens over a period of time. So what do? We use this design in our culture change learning process, where the learner is given the information that change is coming his way. What is happening? So he's learning about, he obtains the knowledge, he obtains the skills, but obviously there are things that's going to go through his mind, reflections that he needs to go through. He needs to think differently. How do you apply that back in the workplace? And then during the application workshops, we bring in stop-start processes where the learners can influence other people and think critically about the current processes, policies, and procedures that maybe have to change. And this is just an example that I'm sharing with you. At the end, they share, coming back on Gnowbe. Throughout this whole process, we have Gnowbe, where they can talk to us, share their inputs on the learning journey. Anouk, I don't know if you've got something to add in terms of the culture change experience, but yeah.
No. Well, I think you mentioned it as well. I think one of the things that is the key thing with every cultural change, right? One of the challenges I've always faced for the many decades I worked in that area is how do you make it stick, right? How do you truly drive change? Because eventually you start well, but then how do you keep the momentum, right? How do you make it part of what people do, how they believe, and how do you truly change the way of working, right? In a way that you don't need someone to handhold, but it becomes what you do. It becomes part of the DNA. And I think that's the key thing, that I think the approach we're trying to make is to really do that in this particular way. And also, by the way, Ilonka, I had a look at the group board. I found my way to the group board. And so I want to really thank people for their insights and thoughts, and even some pictures, that came with it. So I think it's great to see how you're applying this, but also learning from each other, right? I think that's an amazing thing. So bring it back to you, Ilonka.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what is critical for me in what I'm giving you today is to keep this design in mind. When whatever learning you design and provide for your learners is give them the knowledge and skill, but go beyond that and design reflection sessions, design time for them to have interactions with cohort sessions, with mentors. And it should not be just a once-off session. It should, in fact, be a learning journey for them.
Yeah, and hold each other accountable, right? Because I think the accountability, the moment you share, you hold yourself accountable, right, for others. Ilonka, we got the sign that we have 4 more minutes to go, so we
great.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go into the most important aspect is your reflection journal. And for us here is I want you to go and reflect for me for today is what have you learned and what is the key takeaway that you are taking away from our session today in the way you would do your new learning designs, in the way that you would apply reflection in your learning. So I'm going to move on to the next session because we're running a bit out of time. So I'll set my timer and I'll provide feedback later. I quickly need you to give me some feedback here on what steps will you take to commit to transformational learning. If you can just add that for us here as well. And how will you ensure a learner-centric approach in future?
Yeah, and I would post it to, so can they post it to the board as well, or not? They just
to
do
the
it
group.
for themselves?
It would be fantastic if we can share it with the group, and you will receive feedback. Remember, this program is going out to all continents, so tomorrow morning there might be more feedback. Great. And then last but not least, I want you to give us a rating scale for your experience today on the Gnowbe platform, and what you've learned. If you can just give us a vote there.
Yeah. And as people kind of vote, I want to also close the session because we have 2 minutes to go. I think, as Ilonka said, we're not writing a symphony here, right? We're playing a bit of jazz as we go along, so things are a bit messy. But the great thing is that, when you get out of your comfort zone and you stretch yourself, that's when you learn, right? And as we've seen, every moment matters because time is limited, right? And I think we have an opportunity as we have a collective of learning, I would say, leaders in many aspects, is to kind of influence if an organization wants to be a follower or leader. And I think if a person needs to, an organization, stay relevant and fit for purpose, not just for now, but in the future. And the only way, in our view, is to be able to do that is to make sure that you implement that transformational learning in a way that you can make learning stick. So you are going to grow the bucket, not, I would say, fill it. So I would say thank you for your presence, for your participation, and looking forward to remaining in touch, because we learn better when we learn together. So I'm looking forward to connecting with each other post this session as well, because the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. And we've seen, if you want to have a magnificent tree, it has a lot of work, but it's worthwhile, right? So thank you for your time, and to be continued for sure, and good luck with the next sessions. Thank you, everyone, and speak again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Anouk and Ilonka, for sharing your wealth of wisdom on transformation journey experience. That was amazing.